Our text for today is 1 Kings chapter 22. Now that chapter has 53 verses, but don't panic. We're not going to read 53 verses today. As we go through this message, we're going to be looking at certain specific verses in this chapter. 1 Kings chapter 22 is where we'll spend our time today. Back in 1995, a movie entitled Braveheart hit the movie screens. And when it hit the screens, it was a hit, winning many awards and making a lot of people a lot of money. The movie, which starred my lookalike, Mel Gibson. Why do you always laugh when I refer to, I don't get it. Anyway, the movie was based on a real life character named William Wallace. And the movie chronicled Wallace leading the Scottish people against the English people in their fight for freedom. And throughout the movie and in real life, William Wallace always displayed a brave heart. In this 22nd chapter of 1 Kings, we're going to meet a man today who had a brave heart. Now, I dare say, and this is no reflection of your knowledge of the Bible, but I dare say you've never heard of him. How many of you have ever heard, now you're in church, so be honest, how many of you have ever heard of a Bible character named Micaiah? Micaiah. Now, I was going to give you a button, but we'll just keep that button. Well, don't feel bad. 99% of the people in the world never heard of him either. But today we're going to hear of him. Today we're going to look at him and we're going to see what really makes up a brave heart against overwhelming odds. First of all, let me give you the context for this message today. In the first 4 verses of this chapter, we have the 2 kings of the 2 kingdoms of Israel having a summit meeting. Their meeting is regarding about them joining their forces and attacking their neighbor, Syria. Sounds like the Daily News, doesn't it? Well, one king, King Ahab, he is all for it. But the other king, King Jehoshaphat, he's a bit more reluctant. He's not sure yet if they should attack. So in their summit meeting, we now move to the second point, which is the crowd. In verse 6, King Ahab brings in 400 of his hand-picked prophets to get their opinion. And you know what their opinion's going to be. It's going to be what King Ahab told them it was going to be. And so in verse 6, they tell the 2 kings, "Go up, for the Lord will deliver it into the hand of the king. Go ahead and attack Syria. God's on our side. God will give you the victory." All 400 say that. But Jehoshaphat is still not completely convinced. So he asks Ahab, "Are these all of the prophets? Are these all of the prophets?" And this brings us to our next point in the story, the criticism. In verse 8, Ahab replies, "Well, there is still one more prophet out there." Now, obviously, this one hadn't been invited to the meeting. There's still one more out there, but he tells the king, "I hate him." Now, why would he hate this prophet of God? Well, he tells us, "Because he does not prophesy good concerning me, but evil." This one prophet that hadn't been invited to the party, Micaiah, he was on Ahab's blacklist because he told Ahab the truth about Ahab. He was on Ahab's hate list and hit list because he was not one of Ahab's yes men. But now Jehoshaphat, to his credit, he wants to hear from this guy with the funny name. And so this brings us to our next point in the message, which is the caution. The caution. We go down to verse 13. A messenger who's actually Ahab's thug, he's bringing Micaiah to the meeting. And look at what he says to him. Now listen, the words of the prophets with one accord encourage the king. That's those 400 cats and what they said. Please let your word be like the word of them and speak encouragement. Can I paraphrase that for you? He said, Micaiah, listen here, hoss. Don't you go into that meeting and rock the boat. Don't you go into that meeting and stir up any trouble. Don't you walk in there and disagree with those 400 guys. You go in there and you say exactly what they've said or else. Now what's Micaiah going to do? He's outnumbered 400 to 1. His king hates his guts. And he's just had his life threatened. Now you talk about being in it. He's in it deep. He's up against it. But now from what this man did, we're going to see our next point, which is the courage. And this is why I call this man the brave heart of the Bible. Look in verse 14 at what he tells the man who's just threatened his life. He says, whatever the Lord says to me, that will I speak. I'm not going to say what you tell me to say. I'm not going to tell you what Ahab tells me to say. I'm not going to tell you what Jehoshaphat wants me to say. I'm going to speak what the Lord tells me to speak. Now, did he do it? Well, we go to verse 17. And when we get to verse 17, when he gets to the meeting, he tells the kings that if they attack, they're going to be defeated. He says, return to your house in peace. The Lord is not in this. Don't attack Syria. Stay put. Okay, you drop down to verse 24. One of the officials there decides to get physical, and he starts slapping Micaiah around. Well, then you go down to verse 27, and we find King Ahab throwing Micaiah into prison. Now, does this change Micaiah's tune? He's been beat up. He's been thrown into prison. So does he change his mind? Does he change his message? Not one word. Not one syllable, not one letter. For in verse 27, he says these ominous words to Ahab, if you return in peace, the Lord has not spoken to me. And then also in that verse, he said to the people there, take heed to my word. Now folks, that's courage with a capital C. That is a brave heart. When you can stay true to the Lord against these odds, 400 to 1, the strongest man in the nation hates your guts, you've been beat up, you've been thrown into prison, and you still stay true to the Lord. That's a brave heart. That is a man unlike most people. A man willing to stand for the Lord no matter the odds, no matter what is done to him. Now, let's look at the conclusion of the story. These two kings, of course, they go ahead and they attack Syria. And what happened? Exactly what Micaiah said would happen. They got their tails whipped. They got defeated. Syria won the battle. And if you read on toward the end of the chapter, you'll read that King Ahab was killed in battle, And at the end of a chapter, you'll read where a pack of wild dogs are licking the blood from his chariot. Now, as we go through life, in this current culture we're living in, and if you're not aware of it, you've been away on Mars for a while. In this current culture we're living in, we as Christians, for what we believe and how we behave, we find ourselves criticized out there. Not in here, but out there, where the Syrians are. And we as Christians out there find ourselves outnumbered by those who oppose us. And we as Christians may even find ourselves threatened on occasion in different ways out there. And when we find ourselves in those situations, then the question comes home to us, what do I do? What do I do? Do I speak up or do I shut up? Do I stand up or do I lie down? Do I stay up or do I give up? Do I dig in or do I give in? Do I stick up or do I fold up like a cheap suit? Do I go along to get along or do I stand alone? Do I compromise or do I show conviction and character? Do I come down with yellow fever or do I come up with a brave heart? It takes sand to stand for the Lord out there. The weak will not speak for the Lord out there. The limp will skimp for the Lord out there. William Wallace had a brave heart against the English. Micaiah had a brave heart against evil. Do we? Do we have a brave heart against evil? Against any and all odds? Do we? We're going to find out. We're going to find out. I promise you that. The Bible tells us that. We're going to find out what kind of heart we have, if it's brave or not. Think about your tombstone. I know that's not a pleasant thought, but wouldn't it be nice if you could have brave heart etched on your tombstone? Brave heart. Would it stick? Or would it slide off? How do you have a brave heart? I close this message, and this is my last one in the series on hearts, but I close this message the same way I closed every one, if you'll recall. How do you have a brave heart? You give your heart to Him. You give your heart to Him, and then He'll give you the courage to have this kind of a brave heart. We don't and we won't have this kind of courage on our own. It comes from Him. And for us to be a brave heart, we have to give Him our hearts.